Welcome back to Make Me Good. I'm your host, David Karli. If you're a returning customer, welcome back. If you're new to the program, we're psyched you're here. Happy to have you. Today, we're going to dive into the topic of divorce. Ooh, right? Tough one, challenging one. But I took some time last night on ChatGPT because we all hear these statistics that divorce affects 50% of marriages in the United States. So I wondered, is that actually true? And the answer is pretty much yes, it is. Half the time, give or take, divorces occur in marriages, not just in the US, but across the world. Today, I'm joined by someone who helps navigate that process. I'd like to welcome to the program, Sarah Davison. Sarah, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Now, let me do a little intro because you've done a lot of stuff for the audience, okay? So, Sarah is known lovingly as the divorce coach, in the ranks of the divorce world, but she is a leading breakup and divorce expert who's turned kind of her own divorce into a lifelong mission to help others manage, heal, recover from such a difficult process, everyone agrees. Now, you are an author of, and I love this title, Screw You, Watch This. And I want to talk about how you came up with that title, How to Recover from Toxic Relationships. So Sarah really offers a roadmap to help people to manage this process. Is that a fair word, manage the process, or is there a better one?
Manage works, but cope better, I think. There's so many different things coming at you in all different areas that it's really a whole toolkit to help anyone navigate both that emotional roller coaster, but also, and I think most importantly, the practical challenges that you face. Sure.
So I want to start with some kind of general leading questions, because obviously there's the nitty and gritty and nuts and bolts about what you do. And you run a program for this, and why don't you mention that early in the process so people, if they're interested, can look it up on coaching this, yes?
Yeah, so this is so important to me, and there's a lot of people dealing with this. So I've trained a lot of people to become breakup, divorce, and toxic relationship coaches.
Oh, so you've got an army now.
We have about 800 coaches in 30 different countries at the moment.
Sara's Divorce Army, I love it. Okay, so my first question I want to ask you, and this is a bit of a pointed question. Is divorce, at the end of the day, a good thing? Ooh. And why?
Well, look.
And I know there's lots of divorces, different types of divorces, but as a general rule, 50% of divorces or marriages end in divorce. Is that good or bad?
Well, actually, not a lot of people know this, but divorce is known as the second most traumatic life experience we go through after death of a loved one. So it's definitely not an easy process.
Sure.
But in many cases, it can be a golden opportunity to redesign your life just the way you want it. Because often when you're in a marriage, you just get into a routine, don't we? A daily routine. You get up, we go to work, we sort out the kids, we do our stuff, and then at the end of the day, everyone has dinner, you go to bed. Actually, getting divorced gives you a chance to jump off that married treadmill and reassess what you actually want from life, who you want to become, what you want more of. So it can be a really exciting opportunity, but it doesn't come without that pain of separation and the heartbreak and actually the fear of the unknown. And I think a lot of people don't leave a marriage, even if they're unhappy, because they're scared of what the future holds. In fact, as humans, and you know this, like, we don't like change. We'd actually rather stay in something that's quite toxic, quite makes us unhappy, because we have 100% certainty on just how unhappy and how toxic that can be, rather than jumping out and taking a chance into the unknown of, well, it could be better, but what if? It can be a good thing.
And I spent some time looking through the book. Here's the book, by the way. You see that, Jacopo? Great. Wonderful. So you frame management of the divorce, separation, divorce, breakups, you kind of categorize them similarly, but you frame it almost like an opportunity, right? An opportunity for rediscovery, an opportunity for embracing change and coming out the other end of change better. Right? Making yourself good again. Talk a little bit more about how divorce represents an opportunity for someone going through the process.
Yeah, I think it's an opportunity for you to take your power back and actually get back in the driving seat of your life. Often when we're in a partnership with somebody, in a marriage or a long-term relationship, we're not the priority. And I know a lot of people listening will understand this because everything else comes first. Your partner, the kids, for sure. If you've got more than one kid, you've got all the dynamics. Maybe you've got parents that need some time as well. And then you've got your work if you're working, or you've got a career, maybe you work for yourself. So again, we usually come bottom of that priority list. And what a divorce or a breakup will do is it will force you into sharp focus, looking at your life and what's important and what's not. Because we're forced to make decisions then. What do I want to take forward, and what am I leaving behind? And then what freedoms does that give me to create other opportunities in my life?
Sure.
So whilst some doors will be closing, and obviously there is some sadness and we have to grieve the end of that relationship, there's also many doors that can open. So, but we have to be open to look at them. And this is the interesting thing, because it's really up to you. And we all go to a point, and this is definitely what happened to me, where you go, this pain is killing me. The pain of a breakup, the pain of coming out of a toxic relationship. Even if you wanted to come out, even if you think deep down it might be the best thing for you, there is some heartache, some suffering, some sadness at the end of that relationship. Yep. So that can go on and be a grey cloud that follows you around forever. It can be. Some people think that divorce is like a ball and chain that they then carry around for the rest of their lives. Or when you get to that moment, you can have that time where you go, do you know what? Enough of that pain. Now I'm going to step up and I'm going to turn this into something positive. And that's something that I focused on in the book, is that pain to power journey.
Pain to power, Yep. Common theme, and one that's always useful, but not always easy to execute. And I think one of the advantages I hope listeners take away is there are strategies to help, and someone like you is an expert. Now, I want to stay on where we were for a moment, because as I was reading through the book and thinking about this, divorce is so emotionally charged, and we hear how marriage is difficult and we have to work at it and it's not all roses. But can divorce, and I don't want to leave this topic because it's important to me, can divorce be the best thing for two people who shouldn't be married in the first place? And there are reasons why we get divorced, which we can talk about. But can divorce be the best thing, even though it's hard and difficult and change is scary and your change in routine is scary, but it's still the best thing for two people if they shouldn't be married in the first place? What's your perspective on that?
Absolutely. For a lot of people, even though they're scared and fearful going into a separation, on the other side, they look back and say, with hindsight, this is way the best thing that I did. This is a better opportunity for me because I can truly be me. And being together with someone that you love is one thing, if it's a healthy dynamic.
Right.
And healthy is interesting to define, right? Because there's lots of different ways it can be healthy. Like, you're still going to have arguments in a healthy relationship. You're still going to have conflict, because that's the nature of two human beings coexisting together, right? But the difference is that you can work through those conflicts. You can communicate in a way where you both have a conversation where you're free and comfortable, importantly, to be able to say how you truly feel about something. And so in that healthy relationship, you can have that dynamic. Now, if you don't have that, that's when it becomes toxic. And when you separate, one of the things people don't understand is that separation doesn't mean that suddenly the toxicity is over. In fact, in a lot of cases, it can get a lot worse. But you are better out of that than in. Although a lot of people will say, I'm staying for the kids. You must have heard that. A lot of people say, yeah, I'm going to stay for the kids. But again, we have to be very conscious of what we're teaching kids that marriage means, what love means. Because if you're living in a family home with children, they are looking at you as the adults as to, this is how a relationship works. This is what love means. This is how you treat someone that you care about. And if it's toxic or not healthy, or even if you're just not getting on and you've got no connection, maybe no intimacy, maybe one of you's unhappy, that is what your children are learning, is what relationships are. And they will, consciously or unconsciously, take that forward with them into their future. So in those cases, again, staying for the kids isn't always helping the children.
Yeah. So some interesting things you dive into in the book. So in contentious divorces, or sometimes abusive divorces, which you talk a lot about in the book, I don't want to use the word compartmentalize, but you create separation and boundaries amidst that toxicity, amidst that challenge and difficulty in productive ways. So in a divorce with children, for example, you have to co-parent. You call it parallel parenting. You mentioned that term. I thought that was interesting. I had not heard that before. Talk about the difference between co-parenting and parallel parenting and how that's useful.
Yeah, that is a really good point, actually, because co-parenting is what a lot of people will want to do, because ultimately that's best for the kids. If you can have a good relationship with both parents, there's no conflict, it's great. It works better for the children, it's definitely in the children's best interests. However, you cannot co-parent with somebody that is a toxic parent. Because the whole idea of co-parenting is that you communicate, you express to each other what you want. So, for example, how much screen time the kids have, what time the kids go to bed. So you'd say, right, 7 p.m. is when I want the kids to be in bed. That's normal. They need their sleep for school. Now, if you give that information to a toxic ex, most of the time they will use that against you because you've given them the power. You've told them what you want. And in a toxic relationship, they want to upset you, cause maximum suffering and pain. Yeah. So at any cost. So at the cost of the children, financial cost, emotional cost, doesn't matter. So ultimately they'll use that against you. So you can't communicate like that. So co-parenting is just not possible with a toxic ex. So that's where a lot of people will talk about parallel parenting. And I mentioned that in the book because that means you're picking your battles. You're not sort of trying to agree or come to some sort of compromise on bedtimes, things like that, the small things. You're looking at the bigger picture. So maybe what schools they're going to go to, what vaccinations you're going to agree to them having, those sort of bigger, higher level things. But the challenge comes still that you've still got to communicate with someone who's toxic, who's going to use that against you. So quite often, even though, yes, that's obviously better than trying to co-parent because you'll drive yourself crazy doing that, you're still going to struggle. So if you give your ex a list of schools you think would be great for your child, they're probably going to say, well, I don't like those. I want one that's completely different place, a completely different school. So it still doesn't work very well, which is the whole premise of my book, because I know there's so many people struggling with these kind of issues. And these kind of tools, parallel parenting, just kind of don't work for everybody. And if you've been through it, you'll know how difficult it can be.
Yeah, let's stay after divorce, and then I want to go back to within divorce, because you work with people probably through this entire process on the decision to divorce, and then afterwards, I presume, correct?
Yes, yeah.
I'm just curious, what percentage of your clients are men versus women?
Well, interestingly, I have about a 50-50 split in my,
I'm shocked. Okay.
Yes. And I think that's because, and you can answer the question for me maybe, but I know a lot of men feel more comfortable with going to a coach, especially in Britain, than they would maybe going to a therapist in some ways. So I find that they have a business coach, they might have a coach in the gym, so therefore coming to somebody like me or any of the coaches I've trained, it would be much more practical, results focused, goal focused. So it's a slightly different approach and much more results oriented than discussing feelings and talking about things, although obviously some therapists are great at moving people forward too, but it's a different approach. Such
a fascinating topic. We go so many directions. My head's spinning here a little bit, but let's stay post-divorce for a second. Okay, so communication is such an important part of any relationship. Of course, an intense and intimate relationship like marriage. But that communication has to continue, as you mentioned, post-divorce, and sometimes under difficult circumstances and with children and so forth. How does one communicate effectively amidst those difficult circumstances? Okay, again, you talk about separation and protecting yourself and ways and strategies to have someone still be effective in communicating, but also protect themselves from the toxicity that exists. Can you talk a little bit more about your strategies to help people to do that?
Yeah. I mean, it is a minefield. And I think that's the first thing. If it's a toxic ex, if it's a healthy ex, then you've got strategies there. You can communicate and you'll know your ex better than anyone. So you'll know how to protect yourself with them and what things you can share without it being taken in the wrong way. But what I specialize in this book is talking about toxic relationships and how do you communicate, remembering that post-separation abuse is one of the biggest misunderstood issues we have around the world. I think people think when you're not living with a toxic person, it gets better, but actually it often gets a lot worse because all the control that was sort of through everything by living together, so they could see you would interact on a minute-to-minute basis. Now that's gone. So they can only control you through the legal paperwork if you're going through a court case, or finances, or the children. And that is really what hurts us the most. So again, they know exactly how to control and how to upset. So communication is really difficult, and quite often you'll see that people won't communicate directly. But the real power here is about taking emotionally your control back. And I created a few ways that you can do that. And I think even though you're physically disassociated, a lot of people, including myself, when I came out of a toxic relationship, we're emotionally thinking about that person all the time. We're still very connected, even though they're not with us. And they can throw grenades at us, so maybe a text message, a WhatsApp, an email, and it can trigger a whole response that sends you into what I call a rabbit warren. They're very good at throwing grenades, which it's like a comment or saying something that wasn't true, and we will react by going, oh, that's not true. Why are they saying that? How can they think that's true? I didn't do that. That's not what happened. And it sort of creates us diving headfirst into this rabbit warren, chasing our tails, trying to justify or understand or rationalize something that isn't even, you can't, it's illogical. But that's where the confusion and the toxicity stays and keeps us stuck. So what I developed is a tool called the gameplay checklist.
All right.
And what this does is it enables us to step back. So I always say that whether you like it or not, you're in a game with someone who's toxic. They're playing a game with everybody. So I know a lot of people don't like to think of it as a game, but it is a game. And they're going to move you around that chessboard like a pawn if you're not engaged with it. So the idea is that we have to understand the game, learn the rules, master them, and stay 2 steps ahead. And so how do you do that? Well, you look at the tactics of the game. And even though your ex may seem like it's completely confusing and you don't understand what they're doing, they are all playing off the same tactics sheet. It's exactly the same gameplay tactic sheet. So it'll be things like lying, bullying, manipulating, mirroring your behavior back at you, cruelty, put downs, isolating you, embarrassing you, all the different tactics that they can use. So I have a spreadsheet, a list of all these in the book. And then what I ask people to do is, instead of diving into that rabbit warren and chasing an answer that's driving you mad and you're phoning your mom and your friend and telling the story over and over again, what we're doing is we're saying, okay, deep breath. Let's look at this tactic list and see, tick them off. Which ones are they deploying at this moment? Oh yeah, they're trying to embarrass me. They're trying to intimidate me. They're being cruel. That's a put down. So instead of getting emotionally involved, we're looking at it very factually and going, right, I see what they're doing. And your pet psycho will have their favorites. So even though they all play off the same gameplay checklist, they'll have their favorites on there. So you'll know after a period of time, oh, look, they're doing this. What this does is it enables you to look with clarity and say, oh, I see what they're doing. Now, what do I want to do? Do I want to do what they want me to do, or am I going to do something a bit different? So it gives you that clarity and that distance without the emotional drama, to be able to make better informed decisions in a calmer state.
Right. That's the key, right? Because it de-escalates emotion and allows you to think a bit more rationally by, number one, understanding what it is you're dealing with.
Yeah.
Right? You categorize them.
Yeah.
So our natural tendency as human beings when threatened is to respond, in kind.
Yes.
And then what happens? Right? It just gets worse and worse and worse. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so this de-escalates you personally, but it also somehow de-escalates the situation because you're managing it more effectively. Is that fair?
Yeah, you're not fueling the fire.
Yeah.
And this is the key here, I think. It's that we all control the remote to our brain, the remote control. Yet we're never taught how to use that. We're never taught. So like you said, we jump into a reaction. Someone's hurt me, I'm upset. Someone's done this, I'm frustrated. I'm going to retaliate. And it escalates, as you said. If you learn how to control the remote to your brain, you can choose how you react to difficult situations. This takes a bit of practice, but you can choose. You can by looking at this list, take a breath, gives you a break. You're not jumping in. You're not going into that auto natural response. Yeah. You're training yourself out so you get a bit more calm, a bit more clarity to make a better informed decision. And that's what it is. It's about dialing down those negative emotions.
I can't help but wonder that. And you mentioned in the book, correct me if I'm wrong, you said be careful using the term narcissism because it's probably overused. But in a situation where there's a narcissistic-like personality on one side, does that control, does that structure escalate emotion on the other side to potentially make it worse?
Well, I like to have a term of endearment for them. So Pet Psycho has, right, their own pattern of responding, right? So I mean, for some it may, for some it won't, but most of the time, if we're not feeding it, they've got nothing to work with. So it's almost like a child, right? If they're having a tantrum and you go in, if you ignore them, they're going to get bored and they have to find that supply from somebody else. So what you're doing is you're saying, I'm neutral. There's a term grey rock, which is a strategy out there, which is quite useful, where you just show no emotion. It's really important that we don't share any personal information, give anything away, because they've got nothing to use. So in most cases, you'll find that it does de-escalate. It may not stop it, because if they don't have anyone else to get that supply from, they might try other things. It might potentially escalate to try and find other areas.
Right.
So again, this is why it's quite a tricky situation. You've got to make sure you're safe. You've got to make sure you've got support in place. I always recommend contacting your local domestic abuse agency, because they will do a risk assessment. They will make sure you're safe and you're connected with local services as well. So again, this is something we need to take really seriously, and I do talk about that in the book, about how you need to protect yourself as well. Yeah.
Do you find, or because we like to think there's light at the end of a divorce tunnel, right? Personally, but potentially as in a divorced relationship, because there's still a relationship there, albeit dysfunctional as it can become.
Yeah.
Do you find that when someone takes the reins to stabilize themselves amidst a divorce process, that the other side actually improves and the relationship improves as a result? Is that fair?
In a healthy relationship, absolutely.
But what about in toxic relationships?
I don't think you can have any control over what they're going to do. And it's almost like there's always going to be a ticking time bomb on the other side. So this is the interesting thing. Abuse is not always nasty. So what I mean by that is that sometimes they can be being nice to you because that's the gameplay that works for them in that moment. You'll realize that everybody in their life has a part to play. So some of them, they'll be, abusive towards in the showing that nasty side with the lies and the intimidation. But then there might be someone else who thinks they're the most charming, the most generous, the most fun person in the room. And that works for them because they need that from those people to get what they need, but they also have that nasty abuse that they're doing with somebody else. So this can work with you as well. So they can be nice sometimes, and this is the trap we fall into very often of thinking, oh, they're being nice. Okay, we're through the bad patch. They've seen the light. We're going to get on. It's going to be great. And that's where you tend to let your boundaries down. Your guard goes down, and then you'll then fall even further down when they come at you for something else. So I would say always know that this person isn't going to change. And just because they're being nice, accept it, work with it, that's great, but it's not necessary forever. And you can't let your guard down with people like that ever.
So it's give an inch, take a mile type scenario. You can't, yes?
Yeah.
Which is, that's scary, right? I mean, because you do have to communicate, you do have to parallel parent or co-parent or whatever might be the case. And it where is that fine line? And I'm sure it is a fine line. And perhaps that's where support systems, as you talk about, or coaches or someone can help so you're not alone. Right?
Yeah.
Because we make mistakes, you make good calls, you make bad calls, but it sounds like this can go down the rabbit hole quickly back into a litigious type of situation before you know it.
Yeah.
So is there a way to stay ahead of that, to try to keep it out of the court systems, which so often are drug into these things?
Yes. I think personally that a lot of the times we get dragged back into the family court system. It's a very toxic environment.
Yeah, sure.
And the education isn't there yet on what abuse is. So if they are charming, they come across very nicely and well presented and confident. If you're a victim or survivor of abuse, you might present in court as emotionally unstable because you're trying to deal with all the trauma you're dealing with because you've been through something where you've lost your confidence. Your self-esteem is gone. You've been chipped away at, gaslit, confused for such a long period of time. So I would definitely recommend staying out of that court system, but a lot of abusers will want their day in court or want that, you see. So again, sometimes you are dragged into that, which is why, as you quite rightly said, support systems are very important. And that's why my company has free online support every week, 3 hours actually of online support that anyone can join from anywhere in the world on Zoom, run by my top coaches that I've trained personally. Because sometimes you need to find your tribe of people that get you, that understand, Because a lot of people, if you haven't been in this kind of relationship, you're just not going to get it.
Yeah.
You can be empathetic, you can reassure, but you're not going to understand the depth of the confusion and the overwhelm that these situations can create.
And as good a time as any to identify those resources to our listeners. You said these free resources. How can people find those if they're interested, if they're listening?
Yeah, thank you. They're on my website. That's saradavison.com. And you can also connect on my Instagram, Sarah Davison Divorce Coach. There's a link there in my bio as well to them. They're phenomenal, and you'll definitely find your tribe. One of the biggest challenges with society today is isolation and loneliness.
Yeah.
And that can come from all sorts of things, but especially divorce and especially heartbreak, especially toxic relationship recovery. So I created this because it's everything I wish I'd had. Someone who really got me. Sometimes friends and family get sick of hearing it, or maybe they're just like,
that's a tall order.
Yeah, because it goes on for a long time. These aren't short cases that sort of come and they're over with. They can go on for years. So, yeah.
Let's talk about life, stay on life after divorce. You know, some people remarry, some people re-engage in relationships, some don't. And that's a personal choice, I suppose. But when you do re-engage, you're still a divorcee. There may be children involved. You're still in this process, but now you introduce a new dynamic, another person into that process. Are there strategies to help that person, or, you know, that's your primary support system in most cases, and it's a lot for them to take during this. So offer some advice or insight into how to re-engage in a new relationship post-divorce when there's still dynamics between the old relationship.
Well, you moving on, if you have a toxic ex, is going to be a challenge because in a lot of cases, unless they've moved on, and even then, they're not necessarily they're definitely not going to be happy for you that you found love again and you're moving on. So that dynamic can be tricky to manage. So again, I would say don't share any personal information with your ex. Really important. You know, you don't need to tell them in most cases what you're doing, who you're dating, how your relationship is progressing. In fact, I would strongly advise that you keep that to yourself and you don't share with them. The challenge comes where you have friends that are in common, they might say something. And again, you have to really consider, do you absolutely have to have those people in your life? Because if that's a door for your ex to hurt you every time, then that could be a challenge. So sometimes we have to let go of friends, really lovely friends, even for a period of time. And you can do that nicely. You can say, look, right now it's causing a lot of fear and anxiety for me. I care about you. Can we just put this on hold for a little bit, and I'll come back when I think I feel safer or more confident about this. But yeah, I think introducing the kids to someone new again, we've got to take our time with things like that. We've got to not rush it. But the most important advice I would give is we have to learn our own lessons before we move on to dating someone else. Because most people who've been in a toxic relationship, if you're truly honest with yourself, will see that you've actually done this before. And it's only when you do the work to understand what is a toxic relationship, what is unacceptable behavior, that we can then build our boundaries back up so we go into healthier relationships. And that's not just better for us, it's better for our kids. And when we do the work, that's when we stop repeating these patterns. It's great for our children, it's great for us in future relationships. And also it's better for future generations because we're breaking that cycle.
Yeah.
A lot of us will repeat the pattern because it feels familiar, which means ironically it feels safe. But very often these relationships are not safe. They're toxic, they're damaging for us. And it takes a lot to build yourself back out of that. It's definitely possible, hence the book, but it takes time, it takes work. So before you jump in, definitely do the work.
Yeah, I hear so much kind of as a recurring theme of the conversation, creating boundaries from the toxicity. You must, in effect, shield yourself in some way from that constant bombardment of toxicity or abuse or whatever you want to call it, whatever it's categorized as. On some level, and let me play devil's advocate for a minute. On some level, some people might see that as kind of running away from a bad situation, right? Maybe unfairly. But instead of addressing it and taking it head on and, I'm going to conquer this, you're saying, don't try to conquer toxicity. It's not possible. What's better is to focus on your own health through these boundaries, as opposed to, I can solve this, I can fix this. What's your insight on that perspective?
Well, you can't fix them, that's for sure.
Same time you said, you cannot fix them.
No.
So people, we don't expect people to ever change post-divorce?
Not if they're toxic. This isn't something that you can necessarily heal. I don't believe they will change fundamentally. I think that, they're not our problem. They're not our challenge. The only way is we have to think about, what can you control?
Yeah.
We cannot control what they're going to do, what they're going to say, their actions, the next grenade they're going to throw in, the next, ripple effect across your entire universe that they're going to create. But what we can control is how we react and what we do. And you can't heal if you're still sitting in the same dirty bathwater. We need to get out, we need to move forward. And once you get out of that relationship and you start seeing it for what it was, some really interesting things that happen. If you've ever left a toxic relationship, I'm sure these will resonate. So, for example, for me, I'd left a toxic relationship and it was a couple of weeks, and I'd gone to stay with some really lovely friends of mine, a lovely couple. And I'd stayed the night, got up in the morning, we were going to go on a car trip. And my friend Emma said, can't find my car keys. At which point I was like, oh my God, oh no. And I looked at her husband, and I was waiting for him to erupt, call her all the names under the sun, to say, you're irresponsible, you're an idiot. And he said, don't worry, darling, you just stay there. I'm going to retrace your steps from this morning. I'll find them. And that hit so hard, because I was bracing for an eruption of anger and rage. Yeah. And what I saw was compassion, calm, kindness. And it really made me think, wow, something's not right here for me, not for them. They're doing great. For me, I'm thinking that my normality was way off. Yeah. So you come out and you start to then recalibrate, and that is going to take a bit of time as you realize, because to stay in a toxic relationship, we have to normalize and minimalize things to enable us to stay. So we ignore things. We want to say, oh, don't worry, you're having a bad day. I understand. But when you get out, you're going to really notice.
Let's go back to marriage, not post-marriage, for a second. I mean, life is challenging at times, for sure. It's fast, it's intense, things go wrong, things happen. And so many couples do counseling within marriage to try to help, to try to find solutions. And I'm sure sometimes it's toxic just due to circumstances. It's circumstantial, right? Things are intense in our lives right now, kids, work stress, whatever might be the case. Someone going through that process, how far do they go before they have to realize this isn't going to work, right? And I'm not asking for a time frame, but what are milestones maybe that someone going through that process, they're trying to work it out with their spouse, they're maybe seeing a counselor or a psychotherapist or whatever might be the case, they're trying, that can't go on indefinitely, right? At some point, there has to be realization. So someone coming to you saying, hey, we've been in counseling and we're working on it, but it doesn't seem like we're making progress. What's your advice to them?
I think really you've got to get back to basics. What do you want? Because you can always compromise things in your life to stay in something that doesn't quite serve you, but you can tick along with. And if you're happy with that, and a lot of people are, they don't want that change, they don't want to be on their own. At the moment, we're seeing a lot of people that financially just cannot separate, because you've got one house, then you have to have two homes. If you've got children, you've got to look at 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms. Sure. It becomes financially impossible. So, there are some situations where people have to learn to live together and to make that work. But I think it's really going to come down to the individuals. How comfortable are you and what do you want from life? Like, we only live once, right? And if you can do this in a healthy way where you can separate as friends and both of you are happy, great. But even in the happiest, most amicable of separations, there's always one person that's further down that line of acceptance than the other.
Sure.
So one person is going to struggle a bit more than the other. So I think it's understanding what you want. Do you want to stay together? Is that the only way forward? You cannot move towards something you cannot see. So a lot of people stay stuck because they can't see what the future looks like. It's either a black hole or a blank canvas. So,
but is that an idealistic future or is it a realistic future? Because they're two different things, right? You're struggling. That's the reason you're in counseling. That's a great point. You have to know what it is you're aiming towards. But that can be so hard to see during that process, yes?
Oh, it's impossible for some people.
So what are resources, or how can people try to find that vision, hopefully a common one between two people, of what is it that we want, and then they can create actionable steps to try to get there?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah.
But if you don't see what it is that you want, there's no way to create actionable steps. Fair?
And I think for everyone in life, whenever you're stuck with something, it's because you don't have enough clarity and you can't make a good decision if the future's either a black hole or a blank canvas. So I always say, look, think about, dream big. Dream big. If you could have anything, if you could be anything, if you could surround yourself with certain people, what would that ideally look like? And then let's start to put some steps together. And that's what coaching's about. It's about looking at where we want to get to, putting steps towards it so you can experience it. So for example, I had a client recently who said, I don't know whether I want to stay in this house or it's a big house, it's the family home. A lot of people get very attached to the family home and actually want to stay, but it's more of a heart decision than a head decision, because financially they'd be much better off to move to maybe something a bit smaller. And in this case, I asked her, what would you like? And we got her thinking and picturing what her ideal home would be like now, which she wasn't really open to even looking to when I first met her. And then I said, go and spend some time in that area. Go and look at what's on the internet for homes of that size. And she found something she absolutely loved. When she had a better, clearer picture, she had two options rather than just the one to think about. Now, that house actually fell through and there wasn't that one available in the end. So she was like, oh, it wasn't meant to be. But actually, the thing is, she'd now seen the opportunity. So there were things. And life throws curveballs all the time. Sure. But you've got to start moving towards it. And if the game changes, you take another path.
It's interesting. So you allow idealism, even maybe unrealistic idealism?
Well, I believe that the world's your oyster. You can put your mind out. I mean, I've achieved things like I was never above a C+. Do you grade like that in the States? Is it C+?
It's changing, but yes, I think still most places do. I don't know.
Miss Newhouse was my English teacher, and I never got above a C. Maximum was a C+ I ever got. So I thought I would be terrible, and now I have 4 best-selling books. So you know what? I think there's always another level. You can always, if you dream big, then you've got much more chance of achieving it than if you set your goals at, I'm not that person. I was never the person to write books, and now I do that. So
we have that in common. I was never meant to be a scientist, and I find myself running a biotech company. Who knew?
Exactly.
Let's talk about kids. You spend a lot of time talking about children because they're so often a part of this process, but not necessarily involved because they're immature, they're developing. We tend to shield them from things. 50% of kids, if the statistics are correct, are in split households. 50%.
I actually think it's higher than that.
How does that carry? And maybe there's historical stats to look at. Do kids of split households have more problems, or do they learn and end up having more success in relationships and marriage, having learned those lessons perhaps the hard way?
Oh, I love this question because I'm quite controversial in the media on this point. Because
all right, let's get into controversy. I love it.
Well, I think there's a lot of research.
Deep dive
here. There's a lot of research that shows that kids will be damaged by divorce.
Yes.
But they don't have to be. They can be, absolutely, but they don't have to be.
What are the things that damage them most? What are the mistakes?
Well, I think when you're arguing in front of the kids and they're seeing that conflict, from a young age up, it can be really disturbing for them because they're seeing the two people they love the most on the planet with conflict, and it puts them in a difficult position. Using the kids against each other, again, is very difficult. But I believe that, and this is the controversial bit, that divorce can actually be a really valuable life lesson for children. And even having a toxic parent can be a valuable gift to children.
Okay, let's stay there. That's a fantastic point. Can't choose your parents. So do kids have to learn to manage them? Dare we say?
Well, this is the thing. You only need one healthy parent for a child to grow up with stability and understanding what good morals and values. So, and I think a lot of people who have married somebody toxic feel very guilty about that parent being there for their kids and what they've put their kids through. But actually the good news is it's going to be okay, because if you learn the skills to manage your ex, then they can have that toolkit too. And let's face it, in life, the wheels are going to come off for our kids. Like, we want to wrap them in bubble wrap, don't we? We want to protect them all the time and make sure they're going to be fine, but they're going to get dumped. They're going to get lied to. Someone's going to upset them and hurt their feelings or not get into the college they want. That is life, and it will continue, right? So what we have to teach them, I believe, is coping mechanisms. Now, today, the teenage rate for suicide is soaring. And the reason for that is kids don't have healthy coping mechanisms. They're turning to vaping, self-harming, and suicide, God forbid. So what we're doing is we're looking at how you can teach yourself as a parent to cope better with stress. So little techniques to dial down those negative emotions that we talked about earlier, being able to control that and teaching them to our kids. So they see, gosh, mum or dad, they went through a breakup. What happened? Yes, they were sad because we don't want to stuff our emotions so they can't see them, so they don't know what's happening. So we want to explain that, I'm feeling sad today. You don't want to show them the raw emotions, the ugly crying on the bathroom floor, or keep that behind a closed door, but to acknowledge and identify specific emotions, sadness, frustration, anger, jealousy, those things are good for kids to understand that we feel those. So they're not going to stuff them down and hide them away. And then once you've taught them that, you can say, how can I cheer myself up today? I'm feeling sad. What can I do? I know. Let's do 5-star jumps. You call it, or jumping jacks, I think you call it.
I love it, bringing exercise into divorce management. Fantastic.
Exactly. Instant state change.
This couldn't have gone better.
Or it could be, let's put on a happy tune and let's dance around the lounge until we fall on the floor laughing. Whatever it is, giving them, so the kids learn that empowering toolkit for themselves.
So we'll wind it down here over the next couple minutes, but 2 questions on that point. Do we over-shelter and over-shield children amidst the divorce process? Because we're taught often by the courts, don't involve the kids, keep the kids out of it. But the kids are asking questions. How do you, as a parent, you're trying to do what's right, you're trying to protect yourself, you're trying to raise a child amidst difficult circumstances. How do you perhaps structure your thoughts on how much to give the kids and what to keep them away from?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I hear that a lot from people asking those things. I think we've got to be honest with children. So if someone has very destructive, toxic behavior and we ignore it and don't say that's not okay, children then don't have a moral compass at a young age. They're trying to figure that out. They're building that. So whilst we can never badmouth the other parent, we don't want to put them down, we don't want to say anything negative about them, we can say, in my world, that's not okay. I would do this. Or, teaching them morals by contrast. So in your house, say, for example, there's no shouting, there's no bullying, there's no intimidation. And if they did that, then that would be the one thing that you would be pretty strict on, and over rewarding kindness and being empathetic and thoughtful. So you're kind of contradicting what's happening in the other house without saying it or without making it too obvious. So I think, we can't badmouth the other parent, but you have to call right from wrong so children can build their own moral compass. And it is a fine line, which is quite difficult to do. So that's where maybe taking some advice on how to do that would help.
So it's still a lead by example scenario.
Absolutely, 100%.
Right? Amidst difficult circumstances, you rise above and show the way through your actions and your attitude and your character.
Absolutely.
Still the best way.
Yes,
Kids
absolutely.
absorb that.
Yeah, you're the role model. They're always watching and always listening, even when you think they're not. So yeah, absolutely.
So it's not just hey, I'll use the male-female perspective. Dad, even though you're divorced, I still want you to take care of my mom. Well, if mom is toxic, abusive, that's not where you are. That's not the best thing to do. So I'm sure kids feel that sense. Or mom, you got to take care of dad if it's the opposite scenario. How do we help them navigate those feelings of, even though you're divorced, I still want you to take care of your ex-wife or husband?
When you say take care of, you mean?
Make sure they're okay.
Oh, okay.
It could be emotionally, it could be financially, it could be any number of things.
Yeah.
But you're saying we have to compartmentalize, we have to build boundaries, which creates separation from the toxicity, but the kid may be in the middle wanting you to take care of each other still. Do we have to say, that's not going to happen?
Oh, okay. Yes, I see. So, I mean, ultimately, we want to have the best relationship we can with the other person, as long as it's safe to do so, and as long as it's safe for the kids to sort of go to both of them. Children will understand over time. I think it's always being respectful, always being friendly, because I developed a tool called Functionally Friendly for exactly this. So
functionally friendly. Yes, great call. Yeah.
And it basically enables you to show up to a situation where your child is there and be friendly to your ex, even if they're doing horrible things behind the scenes, or you're in a very bitter battle behind the scenes, you can turn up and surface level have a question about them. Your ex will probably like talking about themselves. It's usually their favorite subject. So you can distract the conversation, take control of it in a subtle way, and the child can then have you both in the room together. It can be very difficult because a child with a toxic parent will act very differently when they're at that house than they will with you, because they can't be their true self because they're already managing their other parents' expectations and walking on eggshells. So for them to be with you and them means that they're thinking, gosh, well, I feel comfortable to be myself when I'm in this house, but I don't there. So when they come together, who am I and how do I act?
Yeah, really, really difficult, really difficult. Okay, final question. Does having a structure which leads to hope and opportunity post-divorce lead to more divorces?
Ooh.
Because we think, oh, I don't want to get a divorce. It's painful, it's difficult, it's horrible. I've been through a divorce. It is.
Yeah.
It's terrible. And I don't know of a way to make it really good. It's just something you have to work through like anything. But does the structure you've created, and we figured out how to make ourselves good amidst the worst of circumstances, the second most stressful thing outside of death, divorce. Does that hope make people fear divorce less, which leads to more divorces? All right, you're on the hot seat. How are you going to respond to this one?
I think that you're not as scared of it for sure, because you know you can do it. It's like anything. If you go through anything, you think, well, I survived that, bring it on, I could do it again if I had to. So you know you can. But the hope is that you realize that the responsibility lies with us to pick a better partner.
So we screw up 50% of the time? We're not very good decision makers here with relationships. Or is that just the natural complexities of relationships, that you don't truly know someone when you get married, perhaps, and you learn, and then a lot of times it doesn't work?
Well, yes,
Is it fair, or are we making terrible decisions?
I think we need to take a hell of a lot more accountability for the decisions we make. We've got to do the work. We've got to repair the damage. We've got to learn the lessons that we learned from the past ones which went wrong. And that's all the work to sort of dig deep and dive in and really work out what you want, what's important to you. So again, if you don't do that and you just jump into the relationship with the first person with a pulse, which I see a lot, by the way, because being lonely is, nobody wants that. We want to find love again. So again, I think it's about doing the work and making better decisions for ourselves, because you don't have to give your trust away to someone. You have to learn to trust yourself to make better decisions. And when you've done the work, that can be the reality.
All right, one more question, yes or no. Do you still believe in the institution of marriage?
Yes.
Okay, we'll end on that. Thank you so much for being here, Sara. And great work. Congratulations on the book. Screw you. Watch this. Go out and get your copy. If you're a product of divorce or potentially involved in that difficult situation, I think there's a lot of useful information in there, and someone like Sara can really be of value. Thank you so much for being here, Sara.
Thank you so much for having me.
It was great talking with you, and thanks so much for sharing your insight.
Thank you.